what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Oh my God, I love you guys. Welcome to the Conscious-ish Show. I'm Mia Lux, and tonight it's gonna get a little bit sexy, a little bit hot, and definitely a little bit awkward. Because tonight we are talking about sex. And don't freak out, it's not gonna be some awkward sexual education class. I have no props or like anatomically correct diagrams. I promise, sorry. But we're gonna go beyond the basic birds and the bees. And we're gonna ask the brave question, how do we create truly passionate, sexy, satisfying sex lives that we actually want? Now, we live in a culture where we are exposed to so much sex. You know, we have so much sexual freedom, but honestly, like, it's a little tricky to try and translate that with another live human being into our bedrooms. So to help us do that tonight, my special guest is award-winning sexologist, speaker, and author, Jaiya, and she's gonna help me draw back the curtain on stuff like, how do we figure out what we want? How do we even begin to ask for it and explore it? How do we shed the shame about sex and like embrace the pleasure of this most fundamental human experience? Getting jiggy with it. My first ever kiss, I bit the boy. Not on purpose. It wasn't like, you know, like some edgy sex move. I had no idea what I was doing. I was like, oh, kissing. Just lips and teeth and tongue. That's pretty representative of most of my first sexual experiences. Just this like collision of enthusiasm and body parts, you know? Because like no one teaches us that stuff in sex ed. I walked out of sex ed with a really good knowledge of all the STIs I could catch, how to never get pregnant from a banana. Yeah, we don't have real dildos in New Zealand, apparently. Thanks for ruining that fruit forever, Mrs. Stevenson. But did they ever talk to us about how do we experience pleasure? How do we like find our way into like fully express sexuality? Nope, that's like a hard no. They're like, we're gonna let you figure that out completely on your own. If you figure it out, let us know. And you know, when you're young, being sexy is this like mysterious code you have to crack. You gotta figure it out on your own. I remember being like 12 or 13, and one of my friends came and she was like, I figured it out. She's like, apparently, if you bite your lip, it's really sexy. And so there's a bunch of us girls like, you know, and we're like, I don't get it. Why would that be sexy? But for like a year, you had these girls, every time we saw a cute boy, we're like, hey. It didn't really work. But that's largely how we have to figure it out, through painful and sometimes traumatic trial and error. And not just when we're young. Like our entire society's approach to sex is like, oh, just guess. Yeah, no, just guess what each other likes. Don't tell me, and I'm not gonna tell you. We're just gonna randomly like paw our way to some kind of mutually acceptable sexual routine. Like we're gonna have sex, we're just never gonna talk about it. Which is insane! Like imagine you took that approach to any other area in the relationship. Like imagine, for instance, that like it was really taboo and really embarrassing to talk about what food you like to put in your mouth, what tastes you like. Oh, like you eat together as a couple all the time, but never talk about it. Like how would you figure out what to have for dinner? Like, oh, we'll just randomly cook for each other and then read between the lines and choose something safe first, right? Like sandwiches. You'll be the person that goes to Japanese on the first day. Freak him out. So like you make him a sandwich, and they're like, okay, they're like, sandwiches. And then they play it safe and they make you a sandwich back. And you're like, okay, I guess we're sandwich people. And you know, hey, listen, sometimes you like mix up the fillings and swap out the crust, but eventually, 5 years of sandwiches later, somebody cracks and is like, I want to try Mexican! But you say sandwiches are good. You're always like, sandwich. I was faking! start like going through each other's Uber Eats records. Sushi, Thai. Why have we been eating sandwiches the whole time? Yeah, it's crazy. But that's how we approach sex. And here's the problem with guessing. Not only does it lead to like the lowest common denominator of pleasure, but it can lead to some really awkward situations. Like dirty talk is a good one. I mean, gentlemen, listen, a quick tip, just the tip, I promise. If you're gonna dirty talk, like that's fine. Just like, please don't mumble. No, because like when you mumble your dirty talk, you leave us with two options. Either we have to be like, yeah, having no idea what we just agreed to. Or, more likely, you've put us in the awful position of having to ask you to clarify. I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you like say it again a little clearer? I said, you're my dirty little... I said you're my dirty little whore. Yeah, not so sexy the second time. Enunciate. Just as important as clarity is tonality. Big difference between you like that, which is a statement of dominance, and you like that, which is just a question. If you ask a woman if she likes it, and it sounds like a genuine question, there's a very real possibility we're going to turn around and give you honest feedback. Like, no, finally, I don't like it. And now you're not having sex. Now you are having the much dreaded conversation about it. Because, listen, talking about sex in general can be uncomfortable. Talking about sex with the person you actually have sex with is terrifying. Seriously, like, I mean, it's the hurt feelings or the jealousies, we're afraid of the judgments. I mean, I absolutely am. Do you know how awkward I am? I couldn't have a face-to-face conversation with my husband about sex. So do you know what I did? I made a Google document. Very millennial of me, I know. And you know what? I wrote a list of possible sexual experiences, and I shared it with him digitally. And I was like, okay, delete anything you don't want to do. You know, put a star next to something you might be willing to try. I tried to spreadsheet my way to greater intimacy. But what it comes down to is like, it's still face to face. You're still like, sandwiches. Especially with someone you know. Like when you're in a long-term relationship, you know, everyone's tried this. You try to spice it up. You're like, a little lingerie, get the sexy on. But when you know each other so well, one of two things happen. They're either like just shocked, or like you look at each other, you start laughing. It's just funny. Like, really? And the struggle is real. I'm at that point in my life now where I'm realizing that you know, so much of my embarrassment around sex isn't because sex is actually wrong or embarrassing. It's just because I was brought up that way. And you know, I'm not the only one. So let's find out a little bit more about the state of sex with Behind a Desk. Welcome to Behind a Desk, where I sound 12% smarter because I say facts. Fact one. America is surprisingly weird about sex. No, because like on one hand, 92% of our top Billboard songs are about sex, a third of advertisements use sex to sell, and 83% of Game of Thrones episodes are pretty much just porn. So you might be thinking like, oh, I guess America's pretty cool, pretty relaxed about sex. Well, we also have the highest rate of STIs and teen pregnancy, which would suggest not. That indicates a culture that doesn't know how to talk or educate about sex. It's like sex is okay if you're a Daenerys Targaryen, but if you're a normal American, there's not a lot of education and support. In fact, many states still advocate for abstinence to be the only thing on the sex ed menu, despite the fact that studies clearly show abstinence-only education leads to more teen pregnancies. It's like the more we tell teenagers to just don't, the more they go all Nike on that shit and just do it. I feel like, listen, if even presidents can't seem to keep it in their pants on command, how do we expect teenagers to. And here's the thing, if we don't provide a safe, meaningful pathway into sexuality for young people, do you know what they do? Well, they go watch all those free online tutorials on, Pornhub. Yeah, those highly accurate representations of adult intimacy. And here's the problem, is that no one's there to point out that, listen, like the movies aren't real, porn isn't always real. But without any other guidance, it's a pretty good free online training. And not just for curious teenagers. You have to get, last year, we watched 5.5 billion hours of porn, just on Pornhub. We uploaded 115 years worth of new porn content. It's a $75 billion industry, and 30% of all the data transferred across the interwebs is porn related. And listen, I don't know if porn is right or wrong, but we have to listen to what this indicates. We are a lot hornier than we let on. How was your weekend, Barbara? Oh, it was really great. I binge watched a lot of porn. I mean, The Crown. Crown, lady with a hat. Yeah, we are all secretly hiding and repressing our sexual fantasies. But then, of course, 50 Shades of Grey sells 125 million copies, and suddenly we're like, wait, what? You like this too? You? What, we're all a bit kinky? Oh, yeah. Actually, the 2015 Sexual Exploration in America study showed that we're into all kinds of things. Stuff that we would maybe consider taboo is actually very normal now. In fact, what they found is that what is taboo is actually completely subjective. And this is a funny thing, is that so much of what we feel about sex is just determined by cultural norms. Just research other cultures' kind of sexual experiences. In ancient Egypt, they used to hold these giant public masturbation ceremonies. And in Indonesia to this day, in the Pond Festival, it's considered good luck for married people to do a pilgrimage and have sex with a stranger. But in Ireland, there's a little tiny island where the never nudes live. They're not allowed to take off their underwear in front of anybody, and even alone, have to change under a sheet. Some cultures worship genitals. Other cultures are like, this is okay, this is okay, this is okay, this is not okay. All this to say that, how we feel about our bodies and about sex is subjective, which means if something isn't working for us, we can change it. But the vast majority of people report that they don't tell their lovers their sexual needs, despite wanting to. Why? Well, we're afraid of hurting people's feelings. We don't want to go into the gory details. And ultimately, the number one reason is we're just too embarrassed. It's like we have these PTSD flashbacks to having the talk with our parents. It's the penis and the vagina. But studies show that lovers who can actually talk to each other about sex, their preferences, give feedback, they're a lot more satisfied with their sex lives than those of us who don't. The truth is that most people accept repetitive, unsatisfying sex because we don't know how to talk about it. And then we're surprised that we're not really into it anymore. But what if there is a better way to navigate this powerful human impulse and experience? What if leaning into some of the discomfort and the awkwardness could yield this whole new world of connectivity, intimacy, and pleasure? Well, I am all ears on the subject. I have so many questions, and lucky for me, I have someone here tonight who can answer them. My guest tonight is Jaiya, an award-winning sexologist, a speaker, an author of Cuffed, Tied, and Satisfied, Red Hot Touch, and Blow Each Other Away, which is about exactly what it sounds like. And her work really revolves around helping us to understand our sexuality and to find ways to create deep love and the passionate sex lives that we desire. So please join me in welcoming Jaiya. I have been looking forward to this for a while. I've been reading Jaiya's book, Tied, Cuffed, Tied, and Satisfied. And it's kind of blowing my mind, really. The work that you do, how you approach this is something that I really resonate with, I really admire. So thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's all my pleasure.
Oh, I know, can you just tell? She's the most relaxed guest we have. So let's start with, why does sex matter?
Such a good question. Well, one, we're all a product of sex. We're all here because of it. Humanity wouldn't exist
Thanks for
we
making me
didn't-
think about my parents having sex again. Straight in there. But it's true. Okay,
It's also
functional.
really good for our health. It increases our longevity, how long we live. I say have more sex so you can live longer, so you can have more sex. And then also, it's what connects us. Some people really feel that sex is the way that they feel loved, that they feel connected. It brings us pleasure, and pleasure is so good for us. Every cell in your body is actually wired for pleasure. And a lot of people don't know that. Pleasure is our birthright. It's part of what makes us human.
I love that. And you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of us were brought up, that was not the mantra around sex. Pleasure is my birthright, not something that really went on in my family. And I love that. It's a very powerful reconceptualization, especially when, you know, wanting to improve our sex lives does require us to be courageous and open and vulnerable. And so knowing that there's a reason for it, that there are these benefits, that it's something that really can help us be able to more fully express humans, I'm down with that.
And for certain blueprints, sex is actually also a spiritual practice. So we can get into utilizing sexual energy and moving it through the body for awakening.
Well, one of the things I love about your work is the erotic blueprints, which we'll get to. But let's start with, you know, where we're at with sex right now. Most of us don't know how to talk about sex. Most of us, even if we don't have shame, like I don't have shame about sex, but I'm embarrassed about it. You know, like there's like a place for it. Why have we lived in this culture? What happened? Why are we like this?
Oh, that's a really good question. We can go back through so much history. We could look at the Victorians, Puritans. We could blame all kinds of things, but really it's the game our culture is playing. So what is the game in which your culture plays? It becomes taboo. And one of the games of our culture is don't talk about it. I mean, how many of you who are here had a sex education where your parents were like, let's talk about sex, and sat down? Or was it something that was silent? And I ask people this all over the world, what was your sex education? And nobody raises their hand in the audience when I say, who had a great sex education? I'll get a couple of people, right? But oftentimes it's my sex ed was silent. And I said, no, that was a sex education. Your sex education was don't talk about it. And so we get that from history, we get it from religion, we get it from parents, we get it from peers, that this is just something that we don't talk about.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think about my family, and you know, my mom she really tried. Like she came from a very background, but she did. She sat me down and she was like, let's talk about sex. And she even made me rename it. She's like, sex is such a harsh word. And so we renamed it yo-yo. But
right there's an education.
But the problem,
your yo-yo.
Yo-yo. But the problem was that even though she was actively did that, all the subtext and past it, what she role modeled was
that's
silence.
what you really got.
Yeah. So even though it was kind of a disconnect between like how she lived and my parents lived.
Now I'm really curious. Hold on about if it was called called sex yo-yo.
Yeah.
What did you call your genitals?
Well, here's what's interesting. I did the Mama Gina sort of School of Womanly Arts, and during that process, she makes women come up with like, what did your blush? What did your teach you to name? Nothing. It was invisible.
So that this was just ignored,
was
which is
just-
something I see very
Right.
often, right? So we have this disconnect of like we call this the genital hole, because nobody knows. The no-fly zone. No zone. Mine was the tutu.
The tutu. Ooh, the yo-yo and the tutu.
I was really confused in ballet class.
Is this okay? Wow. Yeah. So even the best attempts, you know, can be really challenging. So with this kind of cultural conditioning, let's just start with how do we figure out what we want? Like I'm a grown-ass woman. I consider myself like reasonably well expressed, but when I did your erotic blueprint quiz, I realized like I actually haven't asked myself very seriously what I like and what I'm into. I've never really explored that or given myself permission for it. So how do we start?
There's the head part, right? So the quiz is kind of like, okay, well, this is what I think might turn me on. This is what from past experience might turn me on. It really starts from an embodied practice. And so that may be just even like everybody can try this. Just try touching in between your fingers and just noticing what that feels like. And do you like that light touch? Or does that light touch feel like bugs crawling over your skin? Or you can go to like a deeper touch and just start to explore, experimenting with touch. That's one way. Starting to pay attention, starting to experiment. We do something called sex labs. I'm a super geek. You were talking about spreadsheets earlier. I love making spreadsheets about sex. Oh my goodness.
Really?
I'm turned on by them.
You're turned on by
I give
sex
spreadsheets all the time.
Oh,
to
girl, I got
lovers.
some stuff to share with you.
Yeah, we'll get together with the spreadsheets. So, so lab is another thing that we do where I'll make a hypothesis. Like, would this turn me on if I did this kind of touch for 30 minutes all over my body? Would that be something that turned me on, or would I be frustrated with it? And so I'll make up a hypothesis of yes, this would turn me on, and then I'll test that hypothesis with a 30-minute lab. So actually having discovery time, because with sex we just go in and bump.
Yeah.
And we're kind of figuring out, like, what is it that turns me on? I don't know what turns me on. But if we have a conscious setting where we're like, well, let's explore this. Let's take these 10 techniques and explore this. Or let's try something kinky and tie each other up and explore that. Or get an actual education from a coach or an expert who can teach you and see if you like it. It's kind of like the try it, you may like it. But getting it from your body versus, oh, no, I don't think I'd like that. Because oftentimes our head is giving us the conditioned response. So we have a conditioned response of the game that our culture has been playing around sex, and that is not our true response.
So how do we deal with, let's go to the conditioning, because even as you're saying stuff like, make a lab, touch yourself, I'm like, I don't know if I could do that, right? Like I have this conditioning where part of me is like, would that be weird? Is that, am I allowed to do that?
Is it okay to touch myself?
Yeah,
Can
like,
I ask that of my partner?
So if we have conditioning that, is a bit of a block for this, what advice do you have for us for dealing with that or getting through it?
The first piece is to recognize that these are just parts of ourselves. It's not our true self. So there's a part of you that's like, that would be awkward, or I can't do that. So just separate that part out, because it's not really you. It's just a part of you. And then also, I call them the gatekeepers. That would be, I'm not allowed to do that. That means I'm a bad person. The shame that might come up. The embarrassment. What's the embarrassed part? I have one called Gertrude, the gatekeeper, that's like, you can only have sex with this many people, and once you have sex with that, like the number keeper. So I have a number of like how many people I'm allowed to have sex with because Gertrude is there.
And it's like a conditioned voice. Do you obey her, or do you just look at her and go, oh, it's Gertrude, what's up?
Yeah, but that's kind of like it. It's like, okay, hi Gertrude, what do you really want? Oh, you want to keep me safe? Okay, I understand that. Here's how we're gonna, and then there's also integrating those parts. So we can actually integrate those parts of ourselves and then find the parts that are like, I have one called Puddles. And you can guess about her name. She was me reclaiming like the teenage girl that just wanted to go wild. And she was reclaiming that very sexual aspect of myself that I never let out because I was being a very good girl. And so she's just completely free. She's full of delight. She's very sexual. And so it's claiming now this new part of myself and then integrating that part into myself, which is a part I completely disowned and pushed away.
Okay, so becoming aware of like the kind of conditioned voices, the obstacles, the gatekeepers in our head, maybe even integrating them. Let's talk a little bit about the erotic blueprint then, because I think this was super helpful for me. I didn't even realize, it didn't even occur to me that people would be wired differently sexually, even though we have that with every other part of our life. So tell us a little bit about like, what is a blueprint and why does it matter?
So the erotic blueprint is like a language, and it gives you an ability to say, this is who I am as an erotic being. This is my map. This is what I'm turned on by. These are the superpowers that I actually have as an erotic being. And it helps us to understand each other. So my partner and I, for example, when we were having a very difficult time in our sex life, here I am. I know all these sex techniques, hundreds of sex techniques. I've written all these books, and I'm doing striptease class, I'm like doing that cat pouncy thing in my G-string. And he goes, why are you doing all these things? It's so obvious. Ouch. It was an ouch. And I would come and say, let's have sex tonight. No. And so there was this rejection going on. And he'd initiate sex by cuddling with me. And I'd think, oh my gosh, she's cuddling again. We're gonna go to sleep, like boring. He's lighting the candles and doing the whole romance thing. And I'm like, and not getting it. And so what eventually happened was I understood his blueprint, which then I could come to him and go, and I was 0 in his blueprint. And he was 0 in my main blueprint. And I could go to him now and I can go, oh, I know exactly how to initiate, exactly how to turn him on because I speak his language. Or if a blueprint, the shadow side of his blueprint shows up, we can laugh at it as opposed to before it would be completely like something that would create a fight. Now I just go, oh, there's my love. Like this is who he is, and I can honor and have compassion for who he is as an erotic being, and same for me.
I love that. So it's like a language for how we, kind of like the love languages, how we express, how we receive, how we initiate. And so understanding our blueprint and our partner's blueprint, I'm like, going to make my husband do this test right now. And figuring out how to navigate that together. I love that.
Yes.
And then I want to talk to you about something in your book that, it's really stuck with me. I'm a little bit obsessed. Is this idea of like the empowered erotic persona. Because I think one of the obstacles, especially as you get older, we just find like our routine. We're like, it's sandwiches, right? Like we just find something and then trying something new. You can feel really stupid. You can feel really embarrassed, especially if it's someone you've been with for a while. You're both like, who are you kidding? How do we create, or how do we step into and experiment different aspects of our sexuality? How do we do that?
So the personas are one tool, and for me, it's about expanding the blueprint, right? So my blueprint actually shows me where I'm limited, as opposed to where I'm full on. Like full spectrum sexuality to me means we have all the flavors, and we're completely free to express and explore all of those flavors. And so an erotic persona allows you then to expand into new territory. So let's say I wasn't kinky, right? So my partner and I, we did this experiment for the book, and I wanted to expand into becoming kinky because it was 0 on my list.
Right, so you weren't kinky, he is kinky.
I wasn't,
right.
And he wasn't sexual, so he developed a persona that was sexual, and I developed a persona, his is sly. And, and I like sly a lot. Now I'm blushing. So I developed 3 different dominant personas when I was playing in the kink realm to help me fully engage and find where my sweet spot was. So one was like the wicked kinky mistress, which he loves, it's his favorite. And she's dark, kinky. We can also create polarity with that. So like if he's more of a lighter energy, I can play very dark energy. I can play like a dark, feminine, kinky energy.
But how do you do this without cracking up? Because like, I listen to this and I'm like, yes. But then I'm also like, I try imagine going home and doing that, and I'm like, I don't know how to have that conversation. I don't know how to create the rules for that. So like, let's go into like, how do you ask? How do we communicate about this?
Creating a great container. You have to have a really good container. So it's going to your partner and saying, hey, I feel vulnerable, awkward, shy having this conversation, but here's something I want to play with. Here's something that I want to try. I'd like to really play with a persona and fully embody that persona. We actually do a 6-week process to have someone fully embody that persona so that it's not awkward. So by the time you get there, you've embodied it. It's in your body, so you are it. It's not like role playing. It's walking in as it. So you'll tell, I say, do warn your partner, because if you just walk in.
I know. I know. Do you know the amount of times I've been like, oh, I'm gonna surprise him, and then just the look of shock. And then I'm like, oh, well, now I feel terrible.
Now you feel, it doesn't
like,
feel
oh,
good.
Never mind,
Yeah.
because talking about it is hard.
And then you don't do it again.
No,
So how many
right.
times do you try to experiment in the bedroom, and then you stop because you had that weird,
So talk first.
Yes. Talk first, that thing that we don't do about sex.
Right.
Sandwich, well, tonight, instead of having sandwiches, we're gonna have sushi, and it's gonna be kinky sushi.
Okay, so let's go. So kinky, this is a word that gets bandied about a lot, especially since 50 Shades of Grey. Some people are like, is kinky like handcuffs and whips? I mean, what is it licking toes? I mean, I don't know, can you explain to us a little bit about what is kink?
Yes, it's all of those. And it's
Same time.
what's taboo at the same time, all of it. Smorgasbord. I know so much about your blueprint. Hearing you talk. So it's anything that's taboo for you. That's really my definition of what's kinky. So if licking toes is taboo, my toes licked the other night. So good.
I am a grown woman. I am a grown woman. Licking toes, yes.
Or maybe it's the handcuffs, or maybe it's saying, be a good girl.
Don't do that to me again.
You should have seen us earlier.
Yeah,
We were playing a little.
watch the special bonus video where Jaiya and I go through her quiz together. So kinky is subjective.
Yes.
So it's just whatever our personal edge is. So it's not necessarily like, BDSM. It could just be whatever
It can include
naughty.
that,
Yeah.
but it's whatever's naughty. So if having sex out of missionary position, if you've been doing that for 40 years, and then you have sex at a new position, that can be kinky.
We have, we're learning how to figure out what we want. We're learning how to ask for it, how to create the container. and then exploring it. When we go into the exploration phase, you know, with a partner, for instance, what if you have someone who is uncomfortable with it? Like, is this something it's really good to facilitate, go through a process? Like, how do you, because I know, for instance, like, I find it really hard to just like lead the process. What help is there for couples to kind of get through this, or even single people who don't know how to do it on their own?
We have coaches for so many things in life. You know, we have the person who helps us with our diet and helps us with our fitness and helps us with all of our personal growth and our businesses, but we don't think of hiring someone to help us with our sex life because of the shame. But actually getting a good coach, somebody who really understands the full spectrum of sexuality, can be really, really important. So that's one way to educate yourself. Don't use pornography as education. That is, you know, it is definitely like great to watch if you want to watch it for turn on, but not to think of this as the thing that's educating me. Let me tell you, you know, going down on somebody, when you're trying to film it, you have to do it kind of from the side, you know, but doing it straight on the way that it feels really good, you know, so that education is.
You know, I'm really glad you raised that point, Jaiya, because something that is interesting in our culture is that, you know, I joked about it earlier in the show about, you know, that porn is becoming like a free online training,
right.
But it kind of is, and it's all performative sexuality, right?
Right.
Which has, you know, it's like we've had its place, but when we're all imitating sex, which is literally for show versus
right.
for feeling.
What feels good, yes,
Right.
yes.
So what about, like, do you give feedback during sex or like after sex? Like, how do you start this process, and how do you give feedback? Because like, in my experience, for instance, being like, no, don't do that, more like this. Like, that's not really.
That doesn't work very
Right, so
well.
can you give us some tips on like, how could we, you know, give feedback to any of our lovers in a way that's, you know, effective and uplifting to kind of help this process of exploration?
I start with what feels good. So I'll start with, because that also just training your brain to pay attention to what feels good. Even if you do it right now as an exercise to go, well, find a sensation in your body. A lot of people go to a sensation that doesn't feel good. So if we start searching and finding pleasure, even finding pleasure instead of seeking pleasure, that we're finding pleasure first. And that's one of our main principles, is pleasure first, and finding what feels, everybody do it right now. I feel like just think about like what feels really good, and how can you make this moment even more pleasurable? Is it a shift in your seat? Is it a way that you're touching yourself? You know, just here with your breath. What makes it more pleasurable? And so starting with, okay, lover, here's what feels really good. I love the warmth of your hands on my body. It's so delicious and so yummy. And I would be even more, I don't even love more. Like, I like to speak in my partner's blueprint. So let's just say, for example, my partner really loves tease and anticipation. I might say something like, and I'll tease you all day tomorrow if you took that touch and just made it a little bit more direct, like on my genitals instead of my thigh.
Would you really say genitals?
Like, I wouldn't say genitals. You're right.
Like, that was super sexy until you were like, please place your digits on my genitals.
That was my sex educator persona coming out.
Okay,
Right? So no, I would speak in my partner's blueprint. So if I was giving them anticipation tease, I might say on my yoni, because this is a word that an energetic blueprint would like.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, so this is all good stuff. A final question I have for you is, for someone who is, you know, curious about this, who really wants to take the first step into figuring out what they want and how to explore it, what do you think is the most important thing to start with?
The most important thing to start with is awareness and attention. These are three things. It's awareness, attention, and permission. It's really giving yourself that, well, what sensation is happening in my body? So many of us are here, and we have our awareness here, and making up all kinds of meaning and thoughts that are happening, and it's keeping us from really feeling what's happening. So this awareness now, putting awareness into your body, and then putting attention into those spaces of what really, really is pleasing you and turning you on. And then that permission to go, to explore, to discover, and be free. I think what we're really looking for in sexuality is freedom and permission, because we're doing it anyway. Oftentimes, you talked about this, right? We really are these incredibly creative beings when it comes to sex. We've tried everything. I mean, you could look at like what people search for on the internet, what we're actually doing. It's a lot more than what we're talking about. And so that inability to have that community and conversation around sexuality really puts us into a place of shame, guilt, and embarrassment. And so when we give ourselves permission to have those conversations with each other, to start talking about sex, that's a big step. And I think that that's a big step in changing our culture around sexuality. Because sex isn't just something that we do, it's fundamentally who we are, it's our liveness, it's our humanness. And we really need to make a shift, I believe, in moving us from this shame and silence into freedom and permission to each other.
Yeah, I will second that. Would you mind giving us permission now? Can you write us a permission slip,
yes,
right now?
I write you all a permission slip.
Yes,
everyone,
yes,
here, take it.
Oh, thank you so much, Jaiya. Well, sex. It's something that if we do it right, it can be one of the highest points of our life, something that connects us, a creative force for good. But when we ignore it, when we repress it, sometimes it can be the most frustrating and painful part of our life. So like Jaiya said, maybe it's time we give ourselves permission to open up and get curious and explore and express our sexuality. So time maybe to get a little sexy and stay conscious-ish.